The massive station hung in space like a small moon. It orbited the planet Meridian Prime, a neutral world that belonged to no one. The Galactic Council Station was a wonder of engineering, built to house 300 different species from across the galaxy. Inside, the main council chamber was circular, with seats arranged in rising tiers like an ancient amphitheater. The most powerful civilizations always sat in the front rows, close to the speaking floor where decisions were made. Ambassador Krelvar stood nearly 9 feet tall. His crystalline armor plating caught the light as he moved through the station corridors. 4 powerful arms marked him as a Xinthian, a species that had ruled galactic politics for over 2,000 years. Krelvar himself had served as a diplomat for centuries. He had negotiated treaties that prevented 3 major wars. Other ambassadors respected him. Some feared him. All knew his reputation as the most formidable negotiator in the galaxy. Today was special. The humans were attending their first official council meeting. Earth had joined the galactic community only 6 months ago, after their military forces defeated the Kravix Armada in a battle that shocked everyone. The humans should not have won. Their ships were smaller, their weapons less advanced, but they won anyway using tactics that no one expected. Now they had earned their seat at the council. Krelvar entered the council chamber early, as was his habit. He took his customary seat in the front row, right side, 3rd seat from the aisle. He had sat there for nearly a century. From this position, he could see whoever was speaking clearly. He could make eye contact with other important delegates. His presence in the front row sent a message. The Xinthian Empire was powerful and important. The human delegation arrived 30 minutes before the session began. Krelvar watched them enter with interest. The leader was a woman named Karen Wright. She had been a military colonel before becoming an ambassador. She was shorter than most species in the council, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Her movements were efficient and controlled. Behind her walked Daniel Foster, a young man carrying a tablet computer. The 3rd human was Jake Morrison, broad-shouldered and quiet, constantly scanning the room with careful eyes. The council usher approached the humans, ready to show them to the front section. Empty seats waited there, prestigious positions befitting Earth's new status as a military power. But Ambassador Wright smiled politely and declined. She gestured toward the back of the chamber instead, to the highest tier in the corner. The usher looked confused but nodded. The humans climbed the steps to the back corner and settled into seats that gave them a view of the entire room. Krelvar felt his curiosity rise. This made no sense. In galactic politics, seating position was everything. It showed power, influence, and status. The front rows were where important voices were heard, where decisions happened. The back seats were for minor species, for observers, for those who did not matter. Why would humans choose to sit there? They had just defeated one of the galaxy's strongest military forces. They had earned the right to sit near the front. As other delegates filed in, Krelvar noticed that some of them also seemed surprised by the human choice. A few whispered to each other, glancing up at the back corner. But the humans appeared completely comfortable. Ambassador Wright sat with relaxed posture, but her eyes never stopped moving. She looked at each delegate who entered, noting where they sat. Daniel Foster opened his tablet and began taking notes, but his attention seemed divided. Jake Morrison sat at an angle, positioned where he could see all the entrances and exits. The session began with standard formalities. The council chair, an elderly Talarian named Speaker Vorn, welcomed everyone and outlined the agenda. Today they would discuss a trade dispute between the Morpheus Collective and a mining consortium. It was routine business, nothing dramatic. Krelvar prepared himself to guide the negotiation, as he often did. The Morpheus representative stood and explained their complaint. The mining consortium had violated territorial agreements. They wanted compensation. The consortium representative countered that the agreements were unclear and open to interpretation. Voices began to rise. Other delegates took sides. This was normal in council business. Krelvar waited for the right moment to intervene. When the argument reached its peak, Krelvar stood. His voice filled the chamber with practiced authority. He proposed a compromise that addressed both sides' concerns. He spoke about precedent and galactic law. His solution was elegant and fair. Within minutes, both parties agreed. The dispute was resolved. Other delegates nodded in approval. This was why Krelvar sat in the front row. This was power. Throughout the entire session, the humans said nothing. They simply watched and listened. Ambassador Wright's expression never changed, never revealed her thoughts. Daniel continued taking notes, his eyes tracking different delegates during different discussions. Jake Morrison barely moved, but his gaze swept the room constantly, missing nothing. Krelvar found himself watching them more than he watched the speakers. What were they seeing from up there? What were they thinking? Their silence was not shy or uncertain. It felt deliberate, purposeful. They were studying the council, learning how it worked. But why from the back? Any competent observer would want to be closer to the action. The session ended after 3 hours. Delegates stood and began to leave, forming small groups to continue conversations. Krelvar made his way through the crowd, accepting compliments on his negotiation, but his mind was on the humans. He changed direction and climbed the steps toward the back corner. Ambassador Wright saw him coming. She stood to greet him, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Krelvar took it carefully with one of his 4 hands. Her grip was firm and confident. "Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Wright," Krelvar said. "Your victory over the Kravix was impressive. We are pleased to have Earth as a member." "Thank you, Ambassador Krelvar," Karen replied. "We are honored to be here." Krelvar gestured at the empty seats around them. "I noticed you and your delegation chose to sit here, in the upper tier. I wanted to assure you that seats are available much closer to the speaking floor. More prestigious positions befitting Earth's new status. We can arrange that for your next visit." Karen's smile was polite but gave nothing away. "That is very kind of you, Ambassador. We appreciate the offer. But we are quite comfortable where we are. The view is excellent from here." "The view?" Krelvar looked around, confused. From here, the speaking floor was far away. The other delegates were tiny figures below. "What kind of view did she mean?" "Yes," Karen said. "We can see everything from here. The whole room, all the delegates, every entrance and exit. It suits our needs perfectly." Krelvar did not understand, but he recognized diplomatic deflection when he heard it. The humans had made their choice for a reason, but they were not ready to explain. He decided not to press. "Very well," he said. "If you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask. We are all colleagues here." "Thank you," Karen said. "We look forward to working with you." Krelvar left the chamber, but his mind kept returning to the humans. He had been a diplomat for centuries. He understood power and politics. He could read species and predict their behaviors. But humans were different. Their military tactics had been unconventional yet devastatingly effective. Their technology was strange, mixing primitive elements with surprising innovations. And now this seating choice. That evening, in his quarters, Krelvar reviewed records of the human victory over the Kravix. He watched battle footage, studied tactical analyses. The humans had used ambush strategies, had lured the Kravix into traps, had attacked from unexpected angles. They did not fight like other species, who valued honor and direct confrontation. Humans fought to win using whatever methods worked. Perhaps their diplomatic approach would be equally unconventional. Perhaps sitting in the back was part of some strategy he did not yet understand. Or perhaps they simply did not know the proper customs yet, being so new to galactic society. Either way, Krelvar decided to watch them carefully. Humans were clearly more complex than they appeared. And in his long experience, the most dangerous players were always the ones you underestimated. He thought about Ambassador Wright's words. "The view is excellent from here." What was she really seeing from that back corner? What did humans see that others missed? Krelvar made a mental note to pay closer attention at the next session. Something told him that understanding the humans might be important, and he had not become the galaxy's greatest diplomat by ignoring his instincts. 3 months passed since the humans first attended the Galactic Council. During that time, the council held meetings every 2 weeks. Each session covered different matters: trade agreements, border disputes, technology sharing, resource allocation. The business of governing a galaxy was complex and endless. Krelvar attended every meeting, as was his duty. But now he found his attention divided in a way it had never been before. The human delegation arrived early to every session. They always claimed the same seats in the back corner of the highest tier. Krelvar began to notice that their early arrival was not just habit. They positioned themselves before other delegates arrived, before the chamber filled with activity. From their elevated corner, they watched everyone enter, saw where each delegation chose to sit, observed the small interactions that happened before official business began. Krelvar started keeping notes about human behavior. He told himself it was professional interest, a diplomat studying a new species. But truthfully, he was fascinated. The humans were unlike any species he had encountered in his long career. They spoke rarely during sessions, but when Ambassador Wright did speak, her words were precise and effective. Daniel Foster took constant notes on his tablet, but his eyes tracked specific delegates during specific topics. Jake Morrison remained alert always, his gaze sweeping the chamber in regular patterns. During a session in the second month, something happened that made Krelvar pay even closer attention. Two mid-level civilizations, the Talarian Syndicate and the Morpheus Collective, got into a heated argument about mining rights in an asteroid belt. Both sides claimed ownership based on different historical precedents. Voices rose. Accusations flew. The situation was escalating toward a serious diplomatic incident. Krelvar prepared to intervene. He had the experience and authority to calm such disputes. He was calculating his approach, deciding which legal precedent to cite, when a voice came from the back of the chamber. It was Ambassador Wright, speaking in a tone that was somehow both quiet and commanding. "If I may," she said, "I believe there is a solution that both parties have overlooked." The chamber quieted. Everyone turned to look at the human delegation in their back corner. Karen Wright stood and spoke clearly. She proposed dividing the asteroid belt into zones based on mineral composition, rather than territorial claims. Each species would get exclusive rights to mine the materials they needed most. The solution was elegant. It addressed both sides' actual needs rather than their pride. Within minutes, both delegations agreed. Krelvar was impressed but also troubled. How had the humans understood the dispute so quickly? He reviewed his own observations and realized something uncomfortable. He had been so focused on the main speakers that he missed important details. There had been side conversations between other delegates. There had been subtle body language signals. A quiet exchange between two representatives that revealed their true negotiating positions. The humans from their elevated position in the back had seen all of it. After that session, Krelvar began an experiment. He started paying attention to what he could see from his front row seat versus what would be visible from the back. The results were humbling. From the front, he had an excellent view of whoever was speaking. He could see their expressions, read their body language, gauge their sincerity. But his back was to most of the chamber. To see reactions from other delegates, he had to turn around. To notice side conversations, he had to crane his neck. The humans never had to turn. From their corner position in the highest tier, they had a complete view of everything. Krelvar tested this theory during the next several sessions. He found himself constantly turning to see what was happening behind him. He noticed delegates exchanging looks when they thought no one was watching. He saw small groups forming alliances before votes. He observed the subtle signals that indicated who really held power in various blocks. All of this was happening in plain sight, but only if you were positioned to see it. The humans saw it all without effort. Then came an incident that truly alarmed him. A routine session was discussing a minor border dispute. Nothing controversial, nothing that should cause problems. But suddenly, Jake Morrison stood up. His hand moved to his communication device. He spoke briefly into it. Moments later, two more human security personnel entered the chamber quietly, positioning themselves near different exits. Krelvar watched this with growing concern. What had Morrison seen? He looked around the chamber trying to identify a threat. Everything appeared normal. Then he noticed the Kravix delegation. There were 3 of them as usual. But something about their positioning was odd. They were sitting separately rather than together. Their attention kept shifting away from the speaker, toward the exits, toward Ambassador Wright. 3 Kravix delegates suddenly stood and began moving toward the human section. Krelvar tensed, but Morrison was already moving. The human security chief stepped forward, positioning himself between the approaching Kravix and Ambassador Wright. His stance was casual but ready. His eyes were alert but not hostile. The message was clear without words, "Come no closer." The lead Kravix stopped. "We only wish to speak with Ambassador Wright," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can speak from there," Morrison replied calmly. The Kravix looked at each other, then returned to their seats. No confrontation occurred. But Krelvar was left with questions. How had Morrison known to react before any obvious threat appeared? What had he seen that others missed? After the session, Krelvar reviewed security footage. He watched the Kravix delegates carefully. Their movements had been coordinated. They had spread out deliberately before standing. Their approach toward the humans had been synchronized. It was not aggressive exactly, but it was purposeful. Morrison had read their intentions before they acted. How? Krelvar found himself spending more time observing the humans than conducting his own diplomatic business. His colleagues noticed. "Ambassador, is something troubling you?" asked his assistant, a younger Xinthian named Commander Thane. "The humans," Krelvar admitted. "I am trying to understand them. They sit in the back, yet they see more than those in the front. They speak rarely, yet when they do, their words carry weight. They appear passive, yet they are constantly alert. It is contradictory. Perhaps they are simply cautious," Thane suggested. "They are new to galactic society. They may be uncomfortable in prominent positions." "No," Krelvar said firmly. "This is not discomfort. This is deliberate strategy." "But what kind of strategy and why?" He decided to approach Ambassador Wright directly. After the next session, he climbed the steps to the back corner once again. Karen was gathering her things, preparing to leave. She saw him coming and waited. "Ambassador Krelvar," she greeted him. "How can I help you?" Krelvar decided to be direct. Subtlety had gotten him nowhere with this human. "I have a question," he said. "Why do you sit in the back? You have proven Earth's strength. You have earned respect, yet you choose seats that traditionally indicate low status. I do not understand." Karen studied him for a moment. Her expression was thoughtful, evaluating. Then she smiled slightly. "Walk with me, Ambassador. Let me show you something." She led him to the edge of the tier where they stood. From here, the entire chamber spread out below them. "Look," she said, gesturing. "What do you see?" Krelvar looked. He saw the circular chamber, the tiered seating, the speaking floor in the center. "I see the council chamber," he said, uncertain what she meant. "Every entrance," Karen said quietly. "Every exit, every delegate's position, every possible approach route, every sightline. From here, nothing is hidden. Everything is visible." She turned to face him, and for the first time Krelvar saw something in her eyes that made him reconsider everything. It was not fear or weakness. It was the look of a predator, calm and confident. "Sometimes, Ambassador Krelvar, the best view is from the high ground." She walked away, leaving Krelvar standing alone in the back corner. He looked down at the chamber again, seeing it with new eyes. High ground. Military terminology. The humans were not thinking like diplomats. They were thinking like soldiers, and suddenly their behavior made sense in a way that troubled him deeply. These humans had not forgotten they were at war when they entered the council chamber. They had simply changed the battlefield. The council chamber filled with delegates as it did every 2 weeks. Today's session was supposed to be routine. The agenda listed discussions about expanding trade routes through the Orion Nebula. It should have been straightforward, technical, even boring. But intelligence reports had been circulating through diplomatic channels for weeks. The Kravix Empire was mobilizing military forces near neutral borders. Their delegation had become increasingly aggressive in their rhetoric since losing to human forces 6 months ago. Krelvar entered the chamber and took his front row seat. He noted increased security presence at the entrances. Station guards stood at attention, more alert than usual. But the council chamber itself was considered sacred ground. 2,000 years of tradition protected it. No species had ever violated diplomatic immunity within these walls. Krelvar felt secure as he settled into his seat. The human delegation arrived early as always. Ambassador Wright, Daniel Foster, and Jake Morrison climbed to their back corner seats. But today, Morrison brought 2 additional security personnel. They positioned themselves near side exits, standing rather than sitting. Krelvar noticed this deviation from normal procedure. Were the humans worried about something? The Kravix delegation entered. Krelvar's attention sharpened. There were 12 of them today instead of the usual 3. They wore formal diplomatic robes but moved with military precision. They did not sit together. Instead, they spread out across the middle tiers, positioning themselves in different sections. It was unusual but not technically improper. Delegates could sit wherever they chose. The session began. Speaker Vorn called the meeting to order and introduced the trade route proposal. Representatives from 3 different species stood to present technical details about shipping lanes and safety protocols. It was dry material, Exactly the kind of routine business that made up most council work. Krelvar prepared his notes, ready to contribute his analysis of the economic implications. Then Jake Morrison moved. It was subtle, just a slight shift in stance. His hand went to his communication device. He spoke into it quietly, urgently. Within seconds, the two additional human security personnel straightened. Their eyes began scanning the chamber systematically. Morrison leaned toward Ambassador Wright and whispered something. Her expression did not change, but she became very still. Krelvar felt unease creeping up his spine. He turned to look at the Kravix delegates. They appeared focused on the presentation, but as he watched more carefully, he saw things that did not fit. 3 of them were not taking notes or following the speaker. Their eyes kept moving to exits, to security guards, to station personnel. 2 others had positioned themselves near environmental control panels on the wall. The diplomatic pouches several of them carried seemed unusually large and bulky. Everything happened at once. Ambassador Wright stood. Her voice cut through the technical presentation with absolute authority. Security alert. Everyone evacuate immediately. Front rows to the east exit. Middle tiers to the west. Move now. There was a moment of shocked silence. Who was this human to interrupt official business? Speaker Vorn looked confused. Other delegates hesitated, uncertain whether to take orders from someone who sat in the back corner. But the tone in Karen Wright's voice allowed no argument. It was the voice of someone who had commanded soldiers in battle, someone who knew the difference between a drill and a real emergency. The Kravix delegates reacted, and their reaction confirmed everything. 2 of them rushed toward the environmental control panels. Others reached into their diplomatic pouches and pulled out weapons. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates screamed. Some froze in panic. Others scrambled for exits. Jake Morrison was already moving. He crossed the distance between his position and the nearest armed Kravix in seconds. His weapon, a compact device that fired non-lethal energy pulses, disabled the attacker before the Kravix could aim at fleeing delegates. The other human security personnel created a barrier between the attackers and the exits. They were not the fastest species or the strongest, but they moved with practiced coordination. Every action was precise, economical, effective. Ambassador Wright did not flee. From her elevated position, she directed the evacuation like a general commanding troops. Her voice carried clearly over the chaos. Group of delegates near the south wall. Move left toward the exit. Security. We have attackers moving toward the environmental controls. Station guards, seal the ventilation system now. She saw the entire battlefield, understood every movement, anticipated every problem. Krelvar tried to help, but he was trapped. Panicking delegates blocked his path. His front row position, his prestigious seat, had become a liability. He could not see the full scope of the attack. He could not reach delegates who needed help. He was hemmed in on all sides. For the first time in centuries, he felt truly helpless. Then he saw it. A Kravix attacker broke through the human security line. The attacker was heading toward a group of young delegates from a newly admitted species. They were frozen in fear near the speaking floor, too terrified to move. The attacker raised his weapon. Krelvar was too far away. Other security was occupied. No one could reach them in time except Ambassador Wright. She was already moving, sliding down the tiered seating rather than running around it. She covered the distance impossibly fast. She hit the ground running and threw herself between the attacker and the young delegates. Her small sidearm was in her hand. The shot was perfectly placed. The energy pulse struck the attacker's weapon arm, disabling it without killing. The weapon clattered to the floor. Station security finally arrived in force. Guards poured through the entrances, overwhelming the Kravix attackers. Within minutes, all 12 conspirators were subdued. Medical teams rushed in to treat minor injuries. The chamber slowly calmed, though everyone remained shaken. Krelvar stood in the middle of the chaos, breathing hard. His crystalline armor was intact, but his pride was shattered. He had been blind to the threat developing right behind him. His prestigious position had made him vulnerable. The humans, from their despised back corner, had seen everything from the beginning. They had detected the attack before it happened. They had saved countless lives, including his own. Later, security briefings revealed the full scope of the plot. The Kravix had smuggled weapons past security scanners using diplomatic immunity. They planned to take hostages and poison the chamber atmosphere with a slow-acting toxin. Everyone in the room would have died within hours. The toxin was already being released when Ambassador Wright raised the alert. If she had waited even another minute, it would have been too late. Medical teams cleared the chamber, leaving Krelvar alone with his thoughts. He walked slowly up the steps to the back corner where the humans always sat. He stood where they stood and looked down at the chamber. From here, every seat was visible. Every entrance, every exit, every potential hiding spot or ambush point. The speaking floor, which seemed so important from the front row, was just one small piece of a much larger tactical picture. "Ambassador Wright," a voice said behind him. She had approached silently. He turned to face her. She looked tired but calm. Her clothing was disheveled from the fight, but her eyes were still alert. "You saved us all," Krelvar said simply. "How did you know?" "We saw them positioning themselves," she replied. Their movements were coordinated. They spread out to control different sections of the chamber. They kept watching exits and security rather than following the presentation. Jake recognized the pattern from military operations. "We hoped we were wrong, but we prepared as if we were right. From the front rows I saw none of that," Krelvar admitted. "My back was to them. I was focused on the speaker, on the official business. I was blind. The humans and their back corner position saved everyone, and he had dismissed it as ignorance." Karen stepped beside him, looking down at the chamber. "Are you beginning to understand now, Ambassador?" "I am beginning to," he said quietly. "But I need to understand more. I need to know where this comes from. This way of thinking, this constant vigilance, it is not normal diplomatic behavior." "No," she agreed. "It is not diplomatic. It is survival. And if you truly want to understand, then come with me. There is something you need to see. Something about human history." Krelvar nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I need to learn this. Today proved that my understanding of power and security is incomplete. Show me, Ambassador Wright. Teach me why humans always sit at the back." The human delegation quarters were modest compared to the luxurious accommodations of other major powers. But when Krelvar entered, he immediately noticed something different. One entire wall had been converted into a display. Historical images covered it. Ancient battle maps, tactical diagrams, what appeared to be military formations from different eras of human history. This was not just a diplomatic office. This was a study in warfare and survival. Ambassador Wright gestured for him to sit. "Can I offer you anything? Water? Earth has limited refreshments to share, but we do our best." "No, thank you," Krelvar said. He could not take his eyes off the wall display. "What is all this?" "Human history," Karen replied simply. She stood and walked to the display. "Let me tell you about my species, Ambassador. Let me explain why we think the way we do." She touched a control, and the display shifted to show images of Earth's ancient past. "Humans evolved on a world filled with predators," she began. "Creatures that were faster than us, stronger than us, better armed with claws and teeth. We had no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. We should have gone extinct." The display showed primitive humans hunting across vast grasslands. "But we survived," Karen continued. "We survived because we were smart. Because we could run for days when other predators tired. Because we learned to make weapons and use tools. Most importantly, we learned to see danger before it arrived. Those who did not pay attention, who did not watch for threats, did not survive long enough to have children. Evolution favored the vigilant." Daniel Foster joined them, carrying his tablet. He pulled up additional images. "Human military history is long and brutal," he said. "We have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not honorable face-to-face battles like many galactic species prefer. We fought to win by any means necessary." He showed Krelvar a tactical map from something called the Battle of Canny. A smaller army surrounded and destroyed a much larger force by using positioning and terrain. They forced the enemy to fight in a confined space where numbers did not matter. Then he showed Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers held a narrow mountain pass against thousands. The defenders chose their ground carefully. They made the enemy come to them through a position that negated their advantages. "Do you see the pattern?" Karen asked. "Humans do not seek fair fights. We seek advantageous positions. We use terrain. We choose where and when to engage. We always try to see the whole battlefield." Krelvar studied the images. "This is guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics. My people consider such methods dishonorable. Your people have been the dominant power in the galaxy for 2,000 years, Karen said quietly. You have had the luxury of honor. We have never had that luxury. We fight to survive, and we learned that survival requires constant awareness of our surroundings." She pulled up more images. These are from what we call the Old West period of American history. She showed him saloons and meeting halls. Notice where the law enforcers sit, always facing the door, usually in corners where they can see the entire room. Anyone who sat with their back to the entrance did not live long. Jake Morrison spoke up from where he stood near the door. "It is my job to keep Ambassador Wright safe," he said. "That job becomes nearly impossible if she sits in an exposed position like the front row. Too many angles of approach. Too much exposure. Too many blind spots. The back corner is what we call a defensible position. We can see threats coming. We control who approaches. We have clear escape routes if needed." Daniel added more context. Human languages are filled with sayings about vigilance. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Watch your six, which means watch behind you. Never turn your back on an unknown. These are not just military phrases. Regular people use them. Parents teach them to children. They are woven into our culture. Karen showed him images of modern military training. Soldiers learn to automatically scan for exits when entering any space, she explained. They identify potential threats. They note defensive positions. They plan escape routes. This training never really leaves you even after you stop being a soldier. But surely, Krelvar protested, in a civilized forum like the Galactic Council, such paranoid thinking is unnecessary. The council chamber is protected. It is neutral ground. Ancient protocols govern it. Karen's expression became somber. Ambassador Krelvar, your species has known peace and security for so long that you have forgotten what vulnerability feels like. Humans have never forgotten. In our history, we have been invaded, conquered, betrayed, and attacked more times than we can count. We learned that protocols and traditions mean nothing to someone willing to break them. Today proved that. She pulled up records from recent Earth history. Images of massive wars, cities destroyed, millions dead. This happened less than a century ago, she said. Some humans still alive remember these wars. We remember what happens when you assume safety. We remember the cost of not paying attention. She showed him more. Terrorist attacks, assassinations, incidents where diplomatic meetings were targeted. You asked why we saved everyone today, she said. It is because humans know what it is like to be the target. We know what happens when someone decides rules no longer matter, and we never ever forget to watch the exits. Krelvar sat in silence, processing everything. His worldview was shifting. He had always seen humanity as young, primitive, still learning civilization. Now he saw them as survivors who had refined their instincts through necessity. Their vigilance was not paranoia. It was hard-won wisdom. There is a concept in human military thinking called the high ground, Daniel said. It means elevated positions that give you a tactical advantage. For thousands of years, human armies have fought to control high ground because it lets you see farther, defend better, and strike more effectively. When Ambassador Wright chose those back corner seats, she was not thinking about diplomatic protocol. She was securing the high ground. It is not about fear, Karen added. We do not sit in the back because we are afraid. We sit there because we are always prepared. We hope for peace. We work for peace. But we never assume peace will last. And that preparation, that constant readiness is what allowed us to respond when the attack came. Krelvar stood slowly. He walked to the wall display and studied the images of human history. So much conflict, so much struggle. Yet humans had not become cruel or savage. They had become cautious and strategic. They had learned to survive without losing their capacity for cooperation and diplomacy. I have been a diplomat for centuries, he said quietly. I thought I understood power. I thought prestige and tradition were strength. But you have shown me a different kind of strength. The strength to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The strength to stay vigilant without becoming hostile. The strength to help others even when they dismissed you. He turned to face Karen. If your species has spent its entire existence preparing for threats, what happens when you finally feel safe? When you no longer need to sit with your backs to the wall? Karen's smile was sad. That is a luxury we have never known, Ambassador. And perhaps that is what makes us different. We do not sit at the back because we think we are weak. We sit at the back because we know that safety is never guaranteed. In a galaxy that just proved it can harbor treachery even in its most sacred halls, perhaps that is not such a bad thing. Krelvar nodded slowly. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I have much to learn from humanity. We Xinthians have led through tradition and protocol for so long, but traditions did not save us today. Your vigilance did. He moved toward the door, then paused. Ambassador Wright, I would like to propose a formal exchange program between our species. I want to bring members of my diplomatic corps to Earth. I want them to learn about human strategic thinking and your approaches to security. Will you consider this? Karen looked surprised but pleased. That is quite an offer, Ambassador. We would be honored to host such an exchange. Good, Krelvar said, because today taught me that true wisdom comes from unexpected sources. You humans have knowledge that we need. The knowledge of how to stay safe in an unsafe universe. The knowledge of when to watch and when to act. The knowledge of why sometimes the most powerful position is the one that everyone else overlooks. As he left, Krelvar felt something he had not experienced in decades: humility and also hope. The galaxy had become more dangerous, but perhaps humans could teach other species how to face that danger, not with overwhelming force or advanced technology, but with the simple wisdom of staying alert, choosing good positions and never forgetting that safety must be earned every single day. 3 months had passed since the attack on the Galactic Council. The incident had changed everything about how species viewed security and safety in galactic space. New protocols had been implemented throughout Council facilities. Security forces had been retrained and expanded. But the most interesting change was one that nobody had officially ordered. It was happening quietly, almost invisibly in the minds and behaviors of delegates themselves. The Council held its first full session since the attack. Delegates entered the chamber with visible nervousness. Some glanced around more than they used to. Others walked more carefully, paying attention to their surroundings. The atmosphere was different, more cautious, more aware. But what caught Krelvar's attention most was what happened with the seating. Several major delegations did not rush to claim the prestigious front-row seats as they always had before. The Tellarian Syndicate, traditionally a front-row power, took seats in the upper middle tiers instead. The Morpheus Collective spread their delegation out across multiple levels, rather than clustering together in one prominent location. Other species made similar choices, seeking positions with better views of the entire chamber, rather than proximity to the speaking floor. Krelvar entered the chamber and paused, observing these changes. His own Xinthian delegation had adapted as well. At his instruction, his second-in-command now sat in an elevated position while Krelvar himself still maintained a front-row presence. It was a compromise between tradition and the new reality, but even Krelvar found himself questioning whether his front-row seat was truly the position of power he had always believed it to be. The human delegation arrived early, as they always did. They climbed to their back corner seats, the position they had claimed from day one, but now the atmosphere around them was completely different. Other delegates nodded respectfully as they passed. Some positioned themselves near the humans, recognizing the tactical value of that location. The back corner, once seen as a place for minor species and observers, had become something else entirely. It had become the smart choice. Ambassador Wright acknowledged these gestures with quiet professionalism. She did not celebrate the newfound respect or draw attention to the change in attitudes. She simply took her seat, checked the sightlines as she always did, and prepared for the session. Daniel Foster set up his tablet. Jake Morrison positioned himself at his usual angle. Everything about the human delegation remained exactly the same. It was the galaxy around them that had changed. The session began with a moment of reflection for those affected by the attack. Then the Council had to address the serious matter of how to respond to the Kravix Empire's breach of sacred diplomatic protocols. The debate was intense. Some delegates called for severe military action. Others demanded economic sanctions so harsh they would cripple the Kravix economy. Still others counseled caution, worried that overreacting would destabilize the entire region of space where the Kravix held power. Krelvar spoke with his usual authority, advocating for a firm but measured response. His words carried weight as they always had. He argued that the Council must show strength without seeking revenge, must punish the guilty without condemning an entire civilization. Many delegates nodded in agreement. It was solid diplomatic reasoning, the kind Krelvar had built his reputation on. Then Ambassador Wright requested permission to speak. The chamber fell silent immediately. Delegates throughout the room turned to face the back corner where she stood. The human who had saved hundreds of lives had earned the right to be heard, and everyone knew it. Karen spoke in her usual clear, direct manner without flowery language or diplomatic padding. She agreed that the Kravix Empire must face consequences for violating Council safety. But she pointed out that responding with overwhelming force would create more problems than it solved. Military action would destabilize borders affecting dozens of species. Harsh economic sanctions would hurt innocent Kravix civilians more than the leaders who ordered the attack. Revenge might feel satisfying, but it would not make anyone safer. Instead, Ambassador Wright proposed comprehensive security reforms for all Council spaces, combined with targeted sanctions against Kravix military and leadership specifically. Most importantly, she proposed the creation of a new Council security force. This force would be trained in what she called tactical diplomacy, combining human expertise in threat assessment and prevention with the unique capabilities and perspectives of multiple species. It would be a force that understood that protecting peace sometimes required thinking like soldiers, not just politicians. The proposal generated immediate debate. Some delegates worried about giving humans too much influence over security. Others questioned whether military thinking had any place in diplomatic spaces. But many more recognized the simple truth that human vigilance had saved their lives when traditional security failed. The vote was called and the proposal passed with significant support. The galaxy was learning a new lesson about the value of preparation and awareness. After the session ended, Krelvar approached the human delegation in the corridor outside the chamber. He had made an important decision, one that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Ambassador Wright, he said, I would like to propose a cultural exchange program between our species. Specifically, I want to bring members of my diplomatic corps to Earth to learn about human strategic thinking and your historical approaches to security and conflict. Karen Wright raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised but pleased. That is quite a significant gesture, Ambassador. May I ask what inspired this request? Krelvar looked back toward the council chamber, thinking about everything that had changed. For 2,000 years, he said, the Xinthian Empire has led through tradition and protocol. We assumed our way was the proven way, the best way. But you humans have shown me that there are other kinds of strength and wisdom. He continued, choosing his words carefully. You come from a world that taught you to always watch for danger, to never assume safety, to value strategic positioning over prestigious positioning. I thought these were primitive instincts, but they are not. They are sophisticated survival mechanisms that my people have forgotten we ever needed. In these uncertain times, we need to remember. We need to learn. And you are the teachers we did not know we were looking for. Daniel Foster spoke up with a slight smile. You know, Ambassador Krelvar, there is an old human saying, hope for the best but prepare for the worst. We have found that it serves us well in almost every situation. Krelvar nodded thoughtfully. A wise philosophy indeed. Perhaps we Xinthians have hoped for the best for so long that we forgot about the second part of that equation. We forgot to prepare. That forgetfulness almost killed us all. Ambassador Wright extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. We would be honored to host your diplomatic corps on Earth, Ambassador. We can show you our military academies, our strategic training facilities, and our historical sites. But more than that, we can share the philosophy behind our actions, the understanding that vigilance is not paranoia, that preparation is not cowardice, that sometimes the strongest position is not the most obvious one. Several weeks later, the council met again for routine business. The chamber had settled into its new normal. Delegates were more spread out, more aware of their positions. Security was more visible but also more sophisticated, with officers trained in the new programs that humans had helped establish. The front rows were still prestigious, but they were no longer the unchallenged symbol of power they once were. The human delegation sat in their back corner, as they always had. But they were no longer alone in recognizing the value of that position. Several other delegations had chosen elevated seats with good sightlines. The concept of tactical seating had spread quietly through the council. Not through orders or regulations, but through the simple power of example. Before the session began, a young delegate from a newly admitted species approached the council staff, asking where they should sit. The staff member began directing them to the upper tiers, the traditional seats for new and minor members. But Jake Morrison, who was standing nearby, caught the exchange. He approached the young delegate with a friendly smile and offered simple advice. Choose a seat where you can see everything and everyone. Trust your instincts about positioning. The best seat is the one where you feel you can do your job most effectively. The young delegate considered this carefully, then made their way to a corner position in the upper sections, not far from where the humans sat. They settled in with visible relief, as if the position felt right in a way they could not quite explain. Karen Wright watched this quiet exchange with satisfaction. This was how real change happened in the galaxy. Not through grand declarations or forced reforms, but through practical wisdom spreading naturally from one species to another. The session proceeded with discussions of trade routes and resource allocation, the routine business that kept the galaxy functioning. But underneath the routine, something fundamental had shifted. The strongest alien diplomat in the galaxy had discovered why humans always sit at the back, and in discovering it, he had helped change how the entire galaxy understood power, position, and the vital importance of vigilance.